Before I begin the homily, I'd like to make a public service announcement to all the men in the congregation. Guys, it's time to get started on your Christmas shopping. I know we still have a full day yet after today, but it's time to get started. I guarantee you go to the mall today, you'll see the ladies, see, that's the difference between the men and the women. The women, they've got all their shopping done probably weeks ahead of time. The men, I still got plenty of time. You go to the mall today, I guarantee you, the women, they're probably there, if they see something they like, they're enjoying the atmosphere, the smiles on their face, the guys, stress. Or maybe even beyond the stress, it's probably like zombies, It's a different perspective, between the men and the women. I was thinking about that with the Gospel of Luke because, tradition tells us that Luke got a lot of his information from the Blessed Mother. But there's a lot of the perspective from the woman's view in Luke's Gospel. Sometimes even Luke, the Gospel of Luke is referred to as the Gospel of Women. Because when you look at it, there's a lot of things to do with women. You begin with the whole thing at the very beginning of Luke, the birth of John the Baptist. The focus is how Elizabeth sees this. And then the whole infancy narrative with Mary. And then the two, Elizabeth and Mary together. And then after that, you have the prophetess Anna. And then it's in Luke's Gospel when Jesus is a young boy and they're looking for him. And we hear how Mary held these things in her heart, how she was so panic-stricken trying to find her son. And then you go into Jesus' public ministry, and a lot of the stories have to do with women. You hear about the woman who was the sinner, and she went to Jesus and she washed his feet with her tears and dried them with her hair and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. How he raised the son of a widow from Nain. How he healed a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years. How we learn about these women who supported Jesus and the disciples. It's in Luke that we learn that it's not just Mary Magdalene, but it was Joanna and Susanna and others. And some of the stories and the teachings that Jesus gave. We hear of the widow's mite, how she gave all that she had, even though it was just 2 copper coins. And how the persistent widow wore down the judge. And then later on, in Luke's Gospel, when Jesus was arrested, when the disciples left him, it was the women who stayed. And it was the women who first went to the tomb, who found that the tomb was empty, and heard of the great news and told the disciples, and they couldn't believe it at first. You see, this is significant. There's other stories as well from Luke that focus on the women. You see, this is important because in that time and in that culture, that place, women didn't count. Sadly. Women were insignificant. And yet in Luke's Gospel, the focus is on the women. God chose what the world considered insignificant, what the world didn't count. And God chose them to be the standard bearer of the word, of the message. That's been the story throughout salvation history. Mary is a wonderful example of that, the Blessed Mother. She who was just a young girl, she who was just a handmaid from a small town, insignificant, lowly. She didn't count. But God chose her to be the Theotokos, the God-bearer, the Mother of God. We don't hear it in the Gospel, but right after this, we hear Mary's song of praise, the Magnificat, where she speaks of this, where she says, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he's looked with favor on his lowly servant. From this day all generations will call me blessed. The Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. He has shown the strength of his arm, and he has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. He has come to the help of his servant Israel. He has remembered his promise of mercy, the promise he made to our fathers and to Abraham and his children forever." And you know, my friends, the climax of this choice is in Jesus himself. In just 2 days, we will celebrate God choosing in salvation history what the world considers something insignificant, that God chose to come to us. God the Almighty, God chose to redeem us. And what the world considers insignificant, lowly, weak, in human flesh, in a little child. And it's in this child, in this moment, where human history is centered. Salvation history is all about why we are redeemed. And God continues to choose the weak and the lowly. Here we are. We might consider ourselves insignificant and lowly, that we don't count. But God continues to choose us because he sees something beautiful in us. Maybe we don't see it, but God sees it. Something worthy of redemption. And we celebrate that at Christmas. You know, the other evening, I was just watching just a little bit of TV in the evening. And I just happened to come across an old rerun of All in the Family. Remember All in the Family? You know, Edith and Archie. By the way the miller played. Sorry. Anyway, this episode was about Edith going to her class reunion. I don't know which anniversary it was, but anyway, Archie didn't want to go. You know, he was complaining, but somehow Edith got him to go. And so they went to the reunion, and Edith was enjoying catching up with all of her classmates. Hadn't seen in a long time. But the build-up is that Buck Evans was coming. Buck Evans was, that boy in the class that all the girls had a crush on. All the boys both admired and envied, because he was, the star athlete, the one that looked real handsome. And so this was the build-up. That he came late. He finally came. And the first few classmates didn't recognize him. You know why? He had changed. No hair. And he was big and fat. And he was discouraged. He went over to the punch bowl, and there was Archie. And Archie found out that this was Buck. And he said, just stay there. I got someone that wants to meet you. Oh, Edith! I got someone that wants to meet you, and I bet you won't recognize him. Come over here. So Edith comes over, and as soon as she sees him, Buck Evans. And he says, Edith Baines. Baines, like this was her maiden name. And they just start talking and reminiscing and catching up. And right in the middle of the two is there's Archie. He's just stunned. Because she recognized him immediately where others didn't. And in the middle of their conversation, she stops and she says to Archie, oh, Archie, isn't Buck a beautiful person? Well, that was just enough. And he pulls over to the side and he says, Edith, I'll never understand you. Never. We look at the same person. You see a beautiful person and I see a blunt. And she goes, oh, yeah. Ain't that too bad? And then she looks at him, but you're beautiful too. He knows that she meant it, sincerely, but she got to dig it, God sees something in us that the world does not see. I think that's part of why we celebrate Christmas. And St. Paul says it best in his first letter to the Corinthians. God chose the foolish of the world to shame the wise. And God chose the weak of the world to shame the strong. And God chose the lowly and despised of the world, those who count for nothing, to reduce to nothing those who are something, so that no human being might boast before God. And whoever boasts should boast in the Lord. Amen? Amen. God bless you. Early Merry Christmas.